Testing, testing. I have a microphone now, which means I'm not ever gonna shut up. Yeah, I'm borrowing this microphone from JC, so thank you very much, JC. Today, I'm going to talk about couchsurfing. And couchsurfing is something I've mentioned in so many videos. For those of you who are not familiar with it, couchsurfing is an app. It was a website at first, so then it became an app as well that you can use when you're backpacking or traveling or just generally moving around the world to find hosts. So people who you can stay with for free in their house. I first learned about couchsurfing while backpacking through Africa back in 2017, and I first used it in Zambia to stay with a Zambian couple and a little girl that they had at the time. She was 4, and I had an amazing time. Just had such a great insight into this particular Zambian family's life. It was super safe. Someone in Malawi told me about it, and for the life of me, I have a pretty good memory, but for the life of me, I cannot remember the moment when someone told me about couchsurfing. So whoever that was, I am eternally grateful for that conversation because it changed the way I travel. I arrived in Zambia by bus from Malawi, and the first place I went to was called Chipata, this town on the east of Zambia. And I was picked up by Francis, who was this guy I was in touch with through Couchsurfing, and he had some really good references already on the platform. And this was my first host, so I actually didn't have any references at this point. So they blindly trusted me to come into their home. So I stayed with Francis and his wife Thelma and their little girl Nada for a week. Actually, I stayed in their spare room for a week, and I had an amazing time. We went grocery shopping together, and if you're a guest in a couchsurf's house, in a host's house, you have absolutely no obligation to actually do anything, but I think it's really nice and an act of goodwill to do something nice for them. So you can cook for them. That's my go-to, is usually to cook them a meal or take them out for a meal, or as I did in this case, we went for a grocery shop and I paid for the shopping for the week so that we could all enjoy these meals together. And that was my way of saying thank you. So instead of paying a hotel or an Airbnb, you can stay with somebody for free. Your money can go into gifts or making their lives easier, for example. And it completely changed how I traveled because after I discovered couchsurfing, I was on a shoestring budget, right? As a backpacker, you kind of have your savings and you can travel as long as your savings last. And so I ended up just couchsurfing the whole time I was in Zambia. And I was in Zambia for about 2 months altogether. And so this entire time I didn't pay for accommodation, which is obviously the huge benefit in terms of saving money. But really, the benefit of couchsurfing is it goes way beyond saving money. The true benefit of couchsurfing is that you get an insight into a country that you can only get through the lens of living with locals or through the lens of living with, even if it's an expat, or I don't really like the term expat, but somebody who lives there who's not from there. So after Chipata, let me get this right. So after Chipata and staying with Francis and Thelma, I went to Lusaka, the capital, and I stayed with an Australian guy first. And then I was in touch with a Lithuanian guy as well, and I switched to his accommodation. So I had 2 different experiences in Lusaka, both great. Then after that, I took a bus from Lusaka to Kitwe, in the slightly further north. And in Kitwe, I stayed with an Italian lady who had married a Zambian and had a daughter, but they had then separated. So it was her living with her daughter. And in this particular instance, so in Lusaka, I stayed in a spare room and had a maid, and everything was it was very luxurious. And then when I went to Kitwe, the Italian lady gave me her daughter's room to stay in temporarily. I was there just for a few nights, and her daughter slept with in her bed. So that was kind of their arrangement for couchsurfing. So sometimes it's just a really generous person who literally just wants you in their house to share stories, and that's been my experience of couchsurfing. Couchsurf hosts tend to be Couchsurf hosts tend to be really open-minded and very much into travel. The entire community is full of travelers, true adventurous travelers for the most part. So yeah, couchsurfing has just been incredible. After Kitwe, I had a bit. After Kitwe, that's the story for another time because there was some other stuff. I saw some chimpanzees. I hitchhiked for 7 hours on the back of a truck. Some other stuff happened. I'm gonna make a separate video about that. But when I came back to Kitwe, I took a bus back to Lusaka, stayed with the Lithuanian guy again, and then took a bus from Lusaka down to Livingstone. This is where Victoria Falls is, the famous, world famous waterfalls. And there I couch surfed with a Russian girl who had gotten married to a Zambian guy, and so I stayed with her. He wasn't always there. It was mostly spending time with her and her two dogs, um, who were called Nala and Snowball. Wow, I can't believe I remember that. This was back in 2017, remember? Nala and Snowball, and yeah, I stayed with this Russian girl, and she was really cool. She was so amazing. Her name was Natalia. And so she also gave me this really cool insight into Zambian living because she wasn't Zambian, but she'd been living there long enough to know the ways of Zambians, and obviously she had her husband's influence as well. And they seemed so happy together, and yeah, it was just a beautiful story there as well. And this is another thing, it really enriches your travel because you hear stories from so many different perspectives and so many different age groups, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful way to experience the world. After staying with Natalia, I took a bus to another part of Zambia called called Siavonga, near Lake Kariba. And again, this is just another bit of a hitchhike story and another some other crazy stuff that happened. Again, I will talk about hitchhiking in a separate video. And I ended up staying with a Dutch guy who was, I think, 38. It's weird how I remember just random facts about these people that I stayed with. And he had traveled to, I do remember one very important fact about him. He had traveled to every single country in Africa except Somalia and the DRC because those countries are a little bit more dangerous to travel to. And I remember being amazed because I was just starting with my traveling journey. Um, and so I was just inspired by this guy and his adventurous spirit. And we had some great chats. Obviously, I learned a lot about traveling from him and backpacking in Africa in particular. And he'd obviously fallen in love with Africa because he then moved to Zambia and had this house by the lake and was the manager of a fish farm. I then told him that I was a scuba diver, and he got me to go diving with his team on the fish farm. So there I was with nine, I think it was nine Zambian guys diving in this fish farm. Obviously now I'm vegan, and obviously I think that fish farms are, they shouldn't really be a thing. But um, but it was such a insane experience, and one I would never have experienced had I not gone out there and stayed with somebody local and stayed with somebody who happened to be the manager of a fish farm. These 2 months were so enriching, were so inspirational for me as a traveler, as a baby traveler. This was when I was just starting out, and now I feel like now I've hosted as well on the platform, and I've had people couch surf with me, and I feel like I'm the more experienced one, and I'm the one who's sort of inspiring the guests that stay with me who are just starting out with traveling. So passing on that backpacking wisdom, I suppose. Yeah, so I had a great time with the Dutch guy, and then he gave me a lift back to Lusaka, where I once again stayed with the Lithuanian guy who I became very good friends with. And then it was from Lusaka that I then returned back to Malawi. So that was my whole time in Zambia for the most part. I've missed out a few elements of the story that I will touch on in different videos because this video is going to be too long otherwise. But I just wanted to talk about couchsurfing, and in particular when I first found it. So I went to Zambia and I stayed with 5 different hosts, 5 different types of hosts. I often get a question from solo female backpackers: how do you stay safe when you're staying with strangers? Well, first of all, there's the reference system. So on Couchsurfing, if you're a guest at somebody's house, you can leave a reference for them once you leave. And so you can read through other people's profiles and their references and get a sense of what kind of person this is and make your decision based on that. The other thing is that hosts leave guests references too. So as a surfer, you'll be reviewed as well. And so hosts, you can also check the references of people who want to stay with you and check out what kind of person they are and whether or not you would feel safe hosting them. So there's the whole reference system, which has worked very well, and I've definitely declined people, and I've definitely not stayed with people because of certain references that I read. At the same time, I've read references and been like, wow, I have to meet this person. They sound amazing. So it can go both ways. The other thing I would say for couchsurfing is use your intuition. Your intuition is that inner voice, that inner part of yourself. It's kind of inexplicable, really. It's that part of yourself that tells you whether something is safe. You know, the one that kind of checks out the energy of the people that you meet or the situations that you're in. And your intuition can go a very, very long way in keeping you safe on platforms like Couchsurfing. I have had a couple of iffy encounters on Couchsurfing, and perhaps I will do a video on those as well and how I dealt with them. For the most part, they've been really, really good. For the most part, they've been wonderful, inspirational experiences, and they've enriched my travel. If you're still not sure about whether or not to stay with this person, what you can do is meet them first. I've done that with a few people too. Only maybe 2 or 3 people. I met them before I stayed with them. So I'd meet them in a cafe, somewhere public, and just chat to them. And if they feel like they're a safe person to stay with, you can then make the decision to stay with them. And this is the same if you're hosting. You can always ask to meet somebody beforehand and then go from there. And feel okay with saying no as well. It's totally, totally fine always to say, no, thank you. I don't think I want to stay with you anymore. And set those boundaries as well. I think that's very important. And lastly, if you really don't want to feel unsafe as a solo female traveler, don't stay with single straight guys. You can stay with families, you can stay with gay guys, stay with girls, stay with other people that will make you feel safe. I know there are some people who are in the LGBTQIA plus community, and I think they tend to stay with people who are in the same community as them so that they can feel safe as well. There's so much room on Couchsurfing to couch surf in a safe way, in a way that suits you. I am not sponsored by them. By the way, I know this sounds like a sponsored video. I wish. If Couchsurfing people do watch this video, by all means, sponsor me. But I've just had such a wonderful, wonderful time with the platform, and I'm a huge advocate for it. It's an amazing tool for traveling. So yeah, if you do use Couchsurfing, let me know. And if you've used it before, let me know in the comments what kind of experiences you've had and whether you agree with my assessment of it. And if you've had any bad experiences, share those too. I will do a video on bad Couchsurfing experiences as well. There are only a few incidents, I have to say, so it'll be a kind of a short video, I think. The good experiences I've had vastly, vastly outweigh the bad ones. And yeah, I'll leave it there for today. I hope today's video was helpful to you. I hope today's video inspired you to travel adventurously and to stay with locals and to travel off the beaten path. I forgot to say actually that I let Couchsurfing lead my travel. So some people will say, how do you know where to go? I literally found hosts and went to wherever somebody was able to host me, and had the most adventurous travel doing it that way. So have a wonderful day. Thank you very much for all the new subscribers. Welcome. I don't know what this channel is about really, but I know I love adventure, and so most of the videos will probably have an element of adventure to them. There's a very important video coming up soon. It's taking a lot of emotional effort for me to plan and make that video, but when it's up, I hope it's going to be worth it. Give this video a like and please do subscribe. I appreciate every single interaction that you guys have with the channel. And yeah, thank you very, very much.